right, keep that applause going, please, for the Quammie Williams Ensemble. That was amazing. I wanted drums to come out here, but it's okay. That's all right. Thank you so much again to Quammie Williams, the ensemble. Some members came all the way down from Snowy Berry to give us a very warm welcome here tonight. And I want to welcome you as well here to Raising Our Voices, celebrating and sharing Black Canadian stories. I'm your host, Tammie Sutherland. I'm a reporter with City News, and I'm up every morning very bright and early on breakfast television as well. Thanks. So you know, it's like, what time is it? It's exactly 48 minutes past my bedtime, but it is so worth it to be here again tonight. I emceed last year as well, and I was thrilled to have been asked back. And I have to say that if you were here last year for the 2017 event, it was incredible. It was an incredible event. And if you weren't, stay tuned, because the list of people who we have speaking tonight are equally as talented and accomplished and inspiring. So you're really in for a treat tonight if this is your first time joining us. And if you're returning, welcome back. You have good taste, all right? And to start right now, I'd like to introduce Debbie Denard, Life Promotion Ambassador and Traditional Knowledge Practitioner. She will be giving us and delivering the Territory Acknowledgement. Debbie.
Miigwech, Hawewe Bojo, Neogwanebi Kindigo, Namedo Dam, Anishinaabe, Medewanakwe and Dao. Manitoba Watago Nindonji, Ninda Berry Nungum. I want to introduce myself. My name is Debbie. One of the things I was thinking about backstage was when I was watching the dancing was my friend who is a Mexica dancer in Florida. And what I was thinking about is that the land in one way has already been acknowledged, because in the way that those teachings are for the Mexica, that the land is woken up, that through that dance, we awaken the land, and we let the land know that we're here. We let the land know that we're here to celebrate life. And so I feel that, that the dancers that preceded were actually doing that land acknowledgement, letting the ancestors of this land, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, this territory that was under the covenant of the dish of one spoon, I feel that the people have already woken them up, let them know that we're here, let them know that you've gathered here in this place, and to celebrate all of these speakers, to celebrate the life that you've come as we gathered in this area as the many nations that we are now, and that live here and share these resources. I want to Nimikwecha Wendan, Mijina Anishinaabe Man, those ancestors that lived here, and Nimikwecha Wendan, Madokanan, Gae, Widoko Wishin, the ones that helped the people to survive and take care of that land from the past, that energy that we bring into the future, and that we will continue to live in alliance, we'll continue to live in mutual respect, Jawena Mishanon, and that's all I say for now. Miigwech Bizindawayan.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And we're going to jump right into speakers to start off, so we're switching it up a little bit right now. And our first speaker of the night is a household name here in Toronto and has been since 2013, when he was named the president and GM of basketball operations for the Toronto Raptors. He is also the founder of Giants of Africa Foundation. It's a nonprofit that's dedicated to promote the sport of basketball in Africa and also provide coaching and learning opportunities for many who need it. He is a very busy man, especially today. Thank goodness the NBA trade deadline was at 3, so he can make it, because he's a very busy man. Not as busy as Cleveland, apparently. I don't know if you saw that. But, right, it was really busy in Cleveland. But here we don't need all of that, of course. And so I want to introduce to you, it is my pleasure to introduce Masai Ujiri.
It sounds like she's from Cleveland. Oh man, this is really cool. I'm so appreciative to have this opportunity to speak here, and that's why even on a day like this, I find it important to come to things like this to not only express yourself and share maybe a story or two, but hopefully the part I don't like is when you're talking about yourself. I don't like that that much, but any way you can inspire maybe, and I think I'm blessed to have I think an inspiring story. If I start from being a young boy in northern Nigeria, growing up in a place that I think you people know is not so settled now. I grew up not very many miles from where the 200 or so girls were kidnapped a few years ago, and it amazes me. It still amazes me that I had the best childhood ever. And to see how things have moved and how things change in different places is still amazing. But growing up in a little town called Zaria in northern Nigeria, and whether I was starting to play basketball, growing up playing soccer, whether I was moving to the States and trying to play basketball in high school, college, gain an education, and being too skinny to go to like a high Division I school, and then all the places around the world that you experience people, and you experience culture, and you experience values of what people are about. I'll be honest with you guys, my education has been traveling. My education has been people. My education has been teaching, learning, and learning, and learning. You don't stop learning. You can't stop learning. My education has been respect. And you can't stop respecting people. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you meet. It doesn't matter how poor, how rich. It doesn't matter where someone lives. God put us in these places for different reasons. And God did not put anybody in a place permanently. He put us in places to progress, to grow, to learn, to be bigger, to think bigger, to dream, and to dream bigger. And that's what I truly believe in. And I believe that whether I was playing professional basketball, being lost a little bit in trying to find what my meaning in life was and what my calling was, I found a space in scouting. I found a space in a game that I love, but I wasn't good enough to play. I'll tell you guys this. Every September, when I was playing professional basketball, I had to wait till September every year. I never had a job in July. I never had a job in June. I had to wait for my agent until someone got hurt, and then he'd tell me, oh, you can go replace this guy in Belgium or in Germany or in France. And, that became my education. I had a black book, and I had contacts, and I had people, and you know what? When you treat people well, it all comes back. Yes. I got a part-time, not even a part-time job, a job with the Orlando Magic as a volunteer scout. I happened to be in a place where I got extremely lucky to get this opportunity to scout for the Orlando Magic on my own dime, travel to different places. And but I was actually lucky, had a friend who had a Delta pass that would put me on their buddy pass, and I would travel to all kinds of places. One day I was in Russia, in Moscow, and the next day I was in Buenos Aires, or different places in Africa, trying to look for talent, and basically what we all do is trying to impress, trying to find that next step. And I was blessed that I did it with an open heart. I'll never forget, I went to Belgrade to scout one year, and that year, and didn't have much money, so I stayed with Obina-Ikezie, who was a professional player in Nigeria and a friend. And he had this two-bedroom, he's a big-time player, he had this two-bedroom apartment, and every night I would go out to the internet cafe. I didn't have a computer or a laptop, and I would go out to the internet cafe to go send my reports. And one night I came back, and the door was locked. I had the key, but he had locked the door from inside, and he left his key in the door. I tried to open the door. I couldn't. I called his phone, and he was going through training camp at the time, and so he was very tired, and he didn't answer his phone. So here I was in Belgrade, about midnight, outside the door, winter, and I couldn't get in. I only had money for the internet cafe on me, and there was nowhere else to go. So I slept outside the door. And that's one of the most telling, I think, moments for me in my life, because you think a lot. And in the morning, I knew what time Obina was going to practice, and I didn't want him to see me sleeping outside. So I got up, and I went for a walk. I made sure he had left, and I knew he had taken the key, and now I could go in the door, and I went in the door. And for years, I never told him. And so I've been blessed to have my own foundation in Giants of Africa, and through basketball and through the blessings of all of you, we can go back to Africa, and we can inspire youth through the game and teach them. And one day I brought Obina, who is an unbelievable businessman in Nigeria now and doing unbelievable things there. And I brought him to talk to the kids, the campers in my camp. And when he sat down, I told him I had something to tell him. And I told that story. And Obina cried. He cried because we do everything to try and bring people along. Yeah, you have to do everything to bring people along. Yeah, it doesn't matter. For me, it doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter how big, it doesn't matter where. Who's the next person? We all think that we have to do something grand. You know, sometimes we want to build big things, or sometimes it can be something little, right? Yeah, sometimes it can be your little sister that you help. You don't have to help the whole world. Yeah, sometimes it can be your brother, your neighbor, or many things that can affect people. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be here. To me, basketball is life. It's my life. It's what I've been given. And so I have to give back to somebody. I have to give it back to people. Toronto is my life. The Raptors is my life. I serve it with everything that I can, because I've been given this unique opportunity. Yeah, and this unique opportunity is huge. It's huge. So I urge all of you to continue to grow and to continue to dream big. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you.
Before he leaves, I need to clarify. I was just saying we don't need an overhaul in Toronto like Cleveland does. That's all. Just the joke. That's all, right? Congratulations. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks so much. And thank you for making the time again. Masai Ujiri, very busy today, and still on top of this, it being NBA trade deadline day, wanted to come in and speak, even though he has to rush out. So really appreciate that. And I love what he said. When you treat people well, it all comes back, and he really recognizes, obviously, the opportunity here in Toronto, so it's great to hear from him as well. So we'll get back on the program now. I'd like to introduce the President and CEO of Historica Canada, Anthony Wilson-Smith.
Thank you, Tammie. So I guess you thought after Messiah was going to get even better and more interesting and more inspiring. Ha. Actually, will. I've just got a couple of things, very happy things to get out of the way to say. The first is we're so happy you're all here, and we thank you for being here. Historica Canada is all about the importance of history, of understanding the lessons of history. And there's no, this month, this event, these people and the stories they will tell are a very important part of that history, both good and sometimes things that we as a country have not done so well. So we're delighted to have them and to have you here for that. And also, I forgot to say my thanks to the minister, who will be up shortly, in addition to our other speakers and all of you. And a couple of thanks as well. The first is to our friends at Afro Global Television, who are here tonight and will broadcast the event on their channels next month. And the other is that bring it together for the next one too. This is the third year we've done this, and this is the third year that the TD Bank Group has been behind it. TD does a lot of stuff with us in this area, specifically Black History Month. Also does a lot of stuff with different cultural communities all over the place, some of which you hear about, a lot of which you don't, but they're a tremendous friend to effort like this, and we're very grateful for that. And on that note, I get to introduce our rep for that. So Lavelle Hodge will be up shortly, who is, and this is the only point I have to go to note songs, it's a great title. Lavelle is the Vice President of North American Fraud Analytics, Financial Crimes, and Fraud Management Groups. So behave. Thank you.
I'm going to have to check his accounts. All right. So, good evening, everyone. So they told me I have to stick to the script, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to look down a little bit. Not my mode of operation. I like to talk, but it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Raising Our Voices, Sharing Black Canadian Stories, and to be honoring Black History Month together. How's everyone doing tonight? So on behalf of TD, I'd like to thank Historica Canada for organizing tonight's event and for recognizing the importance of sharing unique stories and experiences of Black Canadians. All throughout the year, Historica Canada helps us explore and learn about what it means to be Canadian in today's world, while also reflecting on our past. And tonight's event celebrates voices, words that have meaning. Voices are powerful. Whether it be Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela or the Right Honorable Michel Jean, these voices and many others were all catalysts for change. They have shaped and influenced the world we all live in today. We live in a country rich with diversity of culture, language, and background. And much more, when we foster learning about each other, we collaborate and generate the best outcomes as Canadians. And at TD, we know that our most vital resource by far is our people. And we work together. We unleash our unique power and potential. This is why we encourage diversity and are proud to promote inclusion for our customers, our employees, and our communities. This is what TD is all about. And our commitment to inclusion and diversity runs deep, and it extends beyond our support for tonight's event. For 10 years, we have supported Black History Month programs and honoring individuals and initiatives that have celebrated accomplishments and contributed to the fabric of the nation that we live in today. And these celebrations have grown since 2008, now extending through multiple partnerships, and which support over 60 community groups and organizations across the country, with our level of engagement expanding year after year. And this February, we are supporting 100 events across Canada. I think that deserves a round of applause. I've been on somewhat of a personal journey learning and growth, and I've benefited remarkably from attending a lot of these events. I'm learning from those of you whom I met and have formed long-lasting relationships, and I'm learning from those of you who I have the opportunity to mentor, and I'm learning from those of you who have mentored me. And in the words of one of my idols, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. Barack Obama. I hope tonight's events will spark dialogue, it will foster learning, and it'll invite the sharing of our experiences. Thank you, and enjoy the evening.
Again, thank you so much for TD for helping make this possible as well. Next, my pleasure to introduce the Minister in Canada here, the Minister of Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship for the Government of Canada, the Honourable Ahmed Hussen.
Good evening. Good evening, brothers and sisters. It's a great night to be joining you here. It's quite an honor for me to be invited by Historica Canada with support from TD Bank to join you here to celebrate Black History Month. I'll very briefly state a number of things. First, when I was appointed minister, one of my first trips was to Nova Scotia, and I went to Halifax, and most specifically, I went to Preston. And thank you, yes. And as someone who grew up in Toronto, I was amazed by the different layers of Black history and Black immigration and African Canadian settlement, and the challenges those people faced, and the resiliency, the resilient nature that they had to overcome all the challenges. I was able to tour what the remnants of Africville, where the former church used to sit. I was given a chance to see the museum. It shows you the fact that Black history is older. Black settlements are older than Canada's Confederation. And then a few months later, in the summer, I went to Saskatchewan. And even there, I was able to see, I was walking in a park, and I was able to see a plaque commemorating the settlement of 1,000 Black people who had moved from Oklahoma to Saskatchewan in search of a better life and a better opportunity. And again, I was floored because that's not something that you learn in high school in Canada. It took me to go to law school to learn about Viola Desmond. I knew way more about Rosa Parks than Viola Desmond, and I think that's a shame. I think the stories of Black Canada have to be told and retold. And I want to specifically thank Historica Canada for playing its part in enabling the community to do so, but it's incumbent on each one of us to make sure that these stories that continue to be erased, that continue to be almost forgotten, are revived, celebrated, and disseminated across this country. Thank you. I want to secondly, talk about the fact that it's been an honor to sit in Parliament with members of the Black Caucus. And you don't hear that. We actually have a Black Caucus in Ottawa. And we sit there, we talk about issues, we engage with the community, and we advocate. You hear people advocate politicians. We advocate within government to make sure that there's an African-Canadian lens to some of the issues that are brought up as part of the discussions across all levels of government in Canada. And in the process of doing that, we latched on to the importance of Canada to recognize and acknowledge and sign on to the UN Decade for People of African Descent. So that actually happened. That happened last week, and I was proud to stand behind Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and together with members of the Black Caucus, where Canada officially agreed to sign on to the UN Decade for People of African Descent. And it's not just a simple commemoration. It compels Canada to do a number of things as part of that recognition. Issues around overrepresentation of African Canadians in prisons, economic development, and so on, and the education system. It shocked me to learn that between 2003 to 2013, there was an 80% jump in the number of Black inmates in federal prisons. So the fact of the matter is, the Prime Minister not only signed on to that document, he acknowledged for the first time for a sitting Prime Minister in Canada that systemic racism is a reality in Canada. He also talked about how he's going to commit his government to not only recognize that systemic racism is a fact, that we have to do better as a government, as a society, to deal with the manifestations of systemic racism. And he also talked about the importance of the government listening to the community, working with the Federation of Black Canadians and other leaders across the country to make sure that we continue the dialogue and the working partnership that has led the government to recognize the decade, but move forward to make real progress on issues such as the overrepresentation that I just spoke about, having the community's input in the government's larger strategy to review the criminal code, to try to deal with the issue of mandatory minimum sentences and so on. But I want to finish by saying that the stories that I referred to earlier, they're really, really important. And they're important because they validate individuals. When you see yourself reflected in a history book or in a university course, it makes you know that you belong. And that is something that can never be minimized. And secondly, I want to encourage all of the community members who are here and beyond that in addition to hard work and moving ahead in life, it's really, really important to push the ladder down and mentor a young person. It's really, really important to do that. It's important to acknowledge not only the historical stories that continue to inspire us, but the recent stories. You've heard of Masai's story and other newcomers who are continuing to add to the fabric of Canada, who are continuing to add to not only the diversity of Canada, but also the diversity within the Black community itself. I think that has to be acknowledged, and we have to acknowledge that that diversity within the Black community does not weaken us, it makes us stronger. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
All right, what a great message right there. Make sure you mentor a young person. It's so important that all of us who can do, of course. So we're going to jump into our second speaker of the night. She's a human rights educator and a writer, also the co-founder and the executive director of the People Project. That's an initiative to bring forth local and international community development for queer and trans folks of color and their allies as well. She's also a co-owner of the Glad Day Bookshop. That is the oldest LGBTQ bookstore in the entire world. You have seen her likely with her husband as well, Teak Milan, just showing an entire other side of Black love and relationships that is not often presented in the media. It is my pleasure to welcome Katrin Milan.
Thank you so much for having me here. I just had a baby 3 weeks ago. And she's up there somewhere with my husband also. This is actually the longest I've been away from her. Oh, y'all are pointing, you can see. Obviously, he's like a tall, tall man with a tiny baby. Yes. So it means so much to me to be able to be celebrating her and thinking about, historically how me and how we came to be here and came to exist, and also thinking about the legacy I'm passing on to her. Now I'm like really obsessed with this idea, and I think it's really beautiful because I think for many Black people in general, there's no time. Nostalgia is kind of a dirty liar that says things that were better than they were, because there isn't really a time for us where we can be nostalgic. I'm not super excited to go back to the 60s. I'm not really thinking about, wow, how fun would it be as a Black woman to be in the 30s? And as a Black queer woman with a family, with a baby, with a partner, with the right to marry, again, these things are not something that come from my past and are very much the fruit of the work that we bring into our future. So, thanks. So to share a little bit of how I came to do the work that I do and how I came to be in the place that I am, I often tell this story that, I came to Canada, like many, many of us, as an immigrant from Trinidad. Yes, Trinidad, I'm sure there's lots of us in the house. That's so good. And like many Trinidadians, because of the way that the diaspora works, because of the way colonization took hold across the Caribbean, I have a very mixed race background. I'm Black, and I'm also Indian, I'm also Arawak, also Venezuelan. I grew up in a household where I was hearing Hindi and Spanish. So it was always an enormous kind of diversity that was very normalized in my life. And it was really only when I came to Canada that I started to feel the pull in the ways that they want to fracture those kinds of identities. And so often I've responded that, I'm not fractions, I'm layers. I'm all of these things at the same time, and Blackness reconciles all of them. They don't feel confusing or difficult or hard to live them, but rather the ways in which we are so often asked to represent only small pieces of ourselves is what makes that process most difficult. When I first came to Canada, my mom is a librarian, and I grew up in the public library. And I think that for me, that was really what rooted me in an understanding that education could be flexible, it could be culturally relative and reflective, and it could be malleable. I watched my mom design programs for children around literacy, working with babies all the way up to teenagers. And the one thing I noticed consistently was that every time education reflected the people who were learning, people got excited about learning. And I was in a library, so I didn't feel limited by any kind of knowledge. I could sit in the stacks for weeks and days at a time and explore so many different kinds of learning. And I think that this created a very different relationship with me, with school, with learning, and made me really realize that I wanted to be a part of that process for so many other people. So once I came away from that experience, I began getting really invested in nonprofits that were working around education, and in particular, really trying to find opportunities to meet people where they were at. I was in high school, and I remember how many people struggled with their experience of learning, and how many Black children were pathologized because of the ways that they were bored in class. They wanted to learn more, and they wanted to be engaged more, but consistently I would watch as educators and school systems would fail them and ignore them, and I knew that there was a way to do this differently. And I think also in coming into myself as a queer woman, it also made me realize how we are never reflected in curriculums. I do this activity often with my students where we ask each other, who did we learn about in history? And often, no matter where we've grown up in the world, we've all learned about the contributions of men, particularly the soldiers. History doesn't often start until the soldiers get here. And so often, as a result of that, we don't learn about what women were doing. We don't learn about what Indigenous folks were doing, what disabled communities were doing. We only learn about one very small sliver of humanity, and that often creates this idea, this mythology that we were not here, that we're brand new and far from it. And so, continuing to do this work, I really began, when I started the People project with my partner at the time, it was really about creating a space where knowledge and equity would meet, where we would be honest with young people in really intentional ways about the work that we were doing, and where we would also be supporting other initiatives throughout the city in the ways that we want to pay things forward as often as possible. And I continued to do that with the work that I was doing there, and also the Glad Day Bookshop, oldest LGBT bookstore in the world, a community space where people could come together and again see themselves reflected in that kind of learning. And I did it in everywhere I could. I did it in arts, in curating different spaces on different stages across the city, and also in yoga. I teach brown girls yoga. I teach yoga to people in our community so often because I think that health is a big part of the way that we learn together. And today, I am honored and lucky to be able to go around the world and to speak to so many people, to have opened for the likes of Cornel West or hosted Roxane Gay when she was just here this summer, and get to connect with people again around this idea of intersectionality, equity, and knowledge. And I think that, again, as community members, as Black folks, we have a responsibility to teach each other the stories of people we don't often hear, to acknowledge the experiences that have made us the people who we are, and to create a community and a culture that is more ethical than the one that we were born into. Thank you so much.
All right, another round of applause for Katrin, Milan. Our next speaker of the night is a lawyer, an educator, as well as a human rights advocate. He's an associate with Falconers LLP, with special interest in anti-racist human rights advocacy, particularly when it comes to anti-Black racism. Now, if you live or work in the city, you have likely either seen or read his comment and his advocacy when it comes to issues that affect the Black community, like carding in the province. He's been very outspoken, has done a lot of great work here in the city. It is my pleasure to welcome Anthony Morgan.
Good night. How's everybody doing? It's a tremendous honor, absolutely, to be here. I'm just setting myself up, if you bear with me for a moment. But I had the opportunity to be here last year, but unfortunately, the weather didn't allow me. My flight got canceled, and so now this is round 2, and I hope, I hope you folks can gain something from what I would like to share. I feel particularly blessed, of course, and humbled, honored to be among the other distinguished speakers that you've heard tonight, and also to just share a small part of my story. And I want to share a particular story about my own upbringing, but before I do that, I would like to stop and say that I'm deeply thankful for the constant love, support, and patience of my family, and also that I've received from the community. You've shaped, inspired, and challenged me, motivated me to not only be who I am, but to leverage my skills and opportunities in service of our collective liberation and our community's well-being. And so I thank you. You can clap for yourself, you can clap for yourself. While I now live and do most of my work in Toronto, I actually grew up in Mississauga, in a small area called Malton. Yeah, Malton. Bam, bam, bam. All right. But although I always lived in Malton, I went to school in a neighboring community of Bramalea, which is in the city of Brampton. You can shout yourself out, Brampton. Brampton, stand up. And now, I went to school in Bramalea because there was French immersion in Bramalea, but there wasn't in Malton. And so I was fortunate that my parents put me in French immersion. Et c'est comme ça que je viens d'appris comment parler les deux langues officielles du Canada. That's how I learned to speak Canada's 2 official languages. And of course, that was instrumental in helping me eventually go to law school, McGill Law, in Montreal. And that foundation in education is what eventually propelled me forward to be the human rights lawyer and community advocate that I am today. Now, I'm very proud of my journey, but in truth, that's not the story I want to tell tonight. For tonight, I don't want to talk about the accolades. I want to talk about things before that. I want to talk about when I was a teenager in high school. In particular, I'd like to focus on a special group of people who really helped nurture me, folks who grounded me, grounded my sense of self, and helped guided me as I was growing up. This is a group I affectionately refer to as the Mandem. So, the Mandem, or my circle of high school friends. So, we had the Mandem, they had different nicknames. There was Nitty, Poppy Seed, Debo, Kirby, Scully, Fada Grizzle, Meth, and of course, Fivehead. Now, with a crew with nicknames like that, what do you think my nickname was? Guess. I heard Big On. That one always comes up. Mr. Morgan. Yes. My teenaged, barely through puberty nickname was Mr. Morgan. Now, there is nothing cool about having your father's formal address as your teenage nickname. So needless to say, I hated the nickname my high school crew gave me. I still remember fussing with the guys. Yo, why couldn't I have a cool nickname like everyone else? Like, yo, even Fivehead's name is cool when you just call him Five. But truth be told, I didn't realize or appreciate it then, but the nickname the guys gave me was a reflection of how they saw me. I wasn't trying to lead the crew, but they saw in me a leader. I wasn't the most talkative in the group, but they treated me like I had something important to say. While we had mutual love and respect for one another, for some reason it was a different kind of love and respect that they had with me. And for that, I'm really thankful. Because I realize now that the guys were seeing through my teenage angst and my self-consciousness. They saw past my insecurity that made me just want to fall in line and be one of the Mandem. Whether consciously or unconsciously, in those formative years, they helped condition me to be the person that I am today. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for that odd high school nickname that I now carry. It helped socialize me in important ways. And I truly believe that they saw something in me, and there is something special within a lot of young people that we don't always see. We don't take the time to see. And I want to offer some words to that because I think often we don't give our kids enough of the support, time, and attention that would allow them to grow into some of the great individuals we've seen this morning, and dare I say, have the opportunity to do some of the things that I've done today. And so I think if we were to think a lot more about how we can organize ourselves as a community to support our youth, to address issues of systemic anti-Black racism as they manifest in our schools, within systems of policing, within the child welfare system, and writ large, then I think we'd be much further along. Now, I am blessed because I had people around me that saw a special thing in me. They nurtured the light. My family, the Mandem, church community, mentors, and the broader Black community. They did this for me. And for that, as I said, and I will keep saying, I'm forever thankful and grateful. When I'm introducing myself to a judge or greeting opposing counsel or meeting with government officials to discuss law reform, each time I'm reminded of what the Mandem did for me. I walk into a room wearing a suit or my lawyer's robes, and I extend a professional greeting. Hello. And I hear it. Hello, Mr. Morgan. It's now and always was more than just a nickname. And to that, I know the Mandem would only have one thing to say. Scene.
goodness. Give it up for Mr. Morgan. Anthony, Mr. Morgan, sorry, thank you for everything that you do. And thank you to the Mandem for supporting him, of course. That's an awesome story, especially in a society where often you see a group of young black men, and you know what people are thinking, right? And so to hear a story like that, that is where you see that young black men can support each other, nurture each other. So thank you for that story. Our next speaker tonight, founder of the Power to Girls Foundation. A graduate in business administration and accounting, she founded the foundation, which is a nonprofit organization to offer young girls the mentors and the support that they may not have had throughout their youth. Also, she's the winner of the Young Black and Gifted Award for Community Service, and her latest project, you might have heard it, it's called Drive Her. It's a ride-sharing program like Uber, but it's for women, by women, to incorporate that and to help everyone feel safe. So my pleasure to welcome Aisha Addo.
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so very much, Historica Canada, for such an amazing event and for having me here. Okay. Awesome. Whew. So, as a young girl, I quite never understood the quest for life beyond Ghana. It never occurred to me that people left the motherland in search of greener pastures, and for some, the beginning of life as they knew it. The glory of abroad never made sense to me until I learned that I will be leaving Ghana for life in Canada. Excited and naive, I told all of my friends. But the question that always seems to come up is, why Canada? Because for most of us, we all had the American dream. My answer was always, well, I get to go abroad and you're staying in Ghana, so be quiet. That always seems to keep them quiet. For me to gloat in my new opportunity and the life that awaits me. On September 19, 2005, my dad came home and said, Aisha, you're leaving today. With no warning, no farewell to my friends and extended family, I gathered my bags and headed to the airport. You see, my mom had cooked this delicious meal that I was promised that I'll get a chance to come back home and eat. But that never happened. Unfortunately, I had to leave right away. So with a heavy heart and tears, I bid farewell to my family and looked forward to the life that was waiting for me. But then, before I left, my dad gave me a very tight hug and said, never forget your roots, never forget where you come from. And that was my very first plane ride to Toronto, Canada. You might be wondering, well, why would they send a 13-year-old to Canada to live on her own? No, I was not coming to live on my own. I was coming to live with my aunt. And I never really understood why, out of the entire family, she decided to bring me to Canada. And later on, I was told that on the day that I was born, she vowed to my mom and to herself that if she ever made it out of Ghana, she would bring me with her. And for that, I'm grateful. Unfortunately, thank you. Unfortunately, 13-year-old Aisha didn't understand why she was taken from her family to live a life of isolation. And did I mention how cold it is in Canada? After living with my aunt for about 1.5 years, I found myself in the system. Flashback to my very first day of high school. Upon walking through the doors of Henry Carr, I was greeted by a couple of girls. Ooh, I got people from Henry Carr here. Yes! I was greeted by a couple of girls, and I thought, yes, I'm going to make some friends, and life in Canada is going to be bearable. Well, I was pulled out of my thoughts when they asked me, hey, where are you from? And in a very thick Ghanaian accent, I'm from Ghana. Then my heart sunk with the questions that followed next. Oh my God, do you speak English? I just responded to you in English. Well, I thought that would just keep them quiet and keep them moving. Unfortunately, the next question was, oh my God, I heard you guys live on trees and you have a pet goat and all these stereotypes that they've heard of Ghana, or well, actually not necessarily Ghana, but Africa. I responded, not my Ghana, and walked away, hoping to never run into them again. It gets worse. I wish I could say that that was the end of the African girl narrative. Unfortunately, it wasn't. This time, my very first math class. I loved math from the time that I was in Ghana. I have to wrap up now. But I got into class, and the very first things that my teacher said to me was, Aisha, did you bring your goat to class today? I thought, well, there goes the love that I have for math. Another opportunity to educate people gone. I'm going to freestyle now because my time is actually up. But this was my life all through high school. Now, like I said, I was caught up in the system. I ended up in foster care at the age of 15. And my foster mom, about a year and a half after, called me and said, Aisha, I have to tell you something. And these were her exact words. Aisha, you are expected to be a high school dropout. You are expected to get hooked on drugs. And you are expected to never make anything out of your life. And with all of the courage inside of me, I wish I had screamed out loud to her, but I said, I am not your stereotype. And I just want to remind you that these are the things that young girls hear of themselves every single day. Young black girls, every single day. So when I remember the things that my dad said in terms of never forgetting my roots, it's about never forgetting where you're coming from. But don't also forget your passion. Don't forget your story, because your story is what makes you. So I wish I could have given my entire speech, but I can't. But one thing that I do want to leave you with is for you to understand that your story will make way for you in ways that you never know, and never be ashamed of where you come from. And just in case you're wondering, Ghana Jollof is better. Thank you.
I'm not even going to get involved in that war. Don't get involved in that war. If you don't know about that war, don't get involved. Don't get involved. It's better. Thank you so much, Aisha. Very powerful. I will not be your stereotype. That is the message, of course, that we're taking from that. Our next speaker for the evening is the Executive Director of Pride Toronto. She's a community builder, a mother, and an artist. And with Pride Toronto's Executive Director title, she brings with her 25 years of community building and experience, both working with nonprofits and with government organizations as well. And I just learned this today. She can spin as well. I did not know this. She is a DJ, big-time DJ, in Toronto and England, and all of her experience on the club scene there really gave her perspective on how those trans and queer folk are represented in certain cultural spaces, and she's going to bring that, of course, to her job here with Pride Toronto. Please welcome Olivia Nuamah.
Hello. Ghanaian number 2. Yeah, indeed. First of all, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you. And secondly, I have to tell you about my just natural sense of nervousness when I am speaking to an audience of my own people. Mostly because, you know, when you're speaking to an audience of not your own people, you can be a little bit more moralizing. But when you are speaking to an audience where you share the same experience, you kind of get a little bit nervous, and mostly you feel humbled by the fact that everybody, you can't lie to this group because we've all been there. But very quickly, I'm here for two reasons. First of all, I'm here because, you know, I am so honored to come and speak after another younger Ghanaian who has blazed a trail for what it means to be young, Black, and African in Canada today. Because that's not my story. My story's a little bit different. And as I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, gee, I wish I could, you know, naturally muster a laugh. I'm thinking, oh, this is the story of the kind of woman post-40, raising two Black boys in the Western world, trying to make a way for myself. So here very quickly, the two things I do reasonably well. The first thing is fight systemic racism. Try to be amongst many that do. And the second thing is try my damnedest to raise two young Black boys not to feel weighed down by a system that feels like it's set up against them. So the first, I want to share two stories of parenthood with you. One of them is my own mother's story, so my mother is a Ghanaian and moved here in the late 70s with my father, who has passed away over the last few years, but himself was homeless in Ghana. And if you know anything about, especially the African, particularly the West African immigrant story, you will know that it is one that's painful and harsh. So there they both came. She just actually recently told me that she'd only known him for about 3 weeks, but she was so desperate to leave. You know? He was like, I'll take ya. You know? So off they came. Have mercy. So, you see, I'm starting to do it already. All of a sudden, it becomes a little bit more lax. So they come, and sure enough, the coldness of Canada is the first thing to hit them. And then secondly, what it means to be a Black couple in Toronto in the 70s smacks them across the face like you wouldn't believe. Ends up with a man who becomes entirely broken and resorts to alcoholism, drugs and other things, and then moves off to America, leaving his wife and 7-year-old daughter who loved him very much as he disappeared one day. The result of that was myself having to be taken back to Ghana and had a beautiful 5 years there for sure, but that was a 5 years separated from my mother, living in difficult conditions with, and when I say difficult, you know, there's nothing difficult about, I say nothing difficult, let me say that again. There's something beautiful about living in and amongst a Ghanaian community in particular, and it's, you know, a story I'll share with you another time. But it was incredibly hard for both of us. And so finally, when we come back together again, we come back together in a little bachelor apartment, having been separated for 5 years, and she looks a lot more tired, having worked factory life all that time, in order to then find her great job cleaning hotel rooms for the next 15 years before she finally finds a job as a nurse in her early 50s. But I tell you, all of that has absolutely meant, and I can remember, you know, we grew up in Regent Park, grew up in Moss Park, grew up in all of these different parks and so-called, you know, parks. But my childhood was a joyous and lovely one. In Toronto. And then in saying that, I quickly left. I left when I was in my early 20s because I wanted to be Black politically. I didn't just want to be Black in color. I wanted for my story to mean something, and it didn't seem to mean anything here. And so I went to London because I figured it would mean something there, and it did. So I'm back, and my second story is coming back with my 2 Black boy children. almost my first introduction was one of, fighting the police, but mostly fighting for Black queer communities. And it is really about fighting for stories that inside the Black community we don't talk about enough. And I have to tell you, I don't need to say this because we all know it. We all love being Black. Tell me. Every day it's a struggle, but it's a struggle I would live every day again. And so while, I raise these 2 children, and trust me, I have a 14-year-old boy. He's about as tall as I am. My son was walking home 10 minutes from where he lives. And he was unfortunately mistaken for somebody who had burglarized a home at 14 years old. And for the first time, he saw the barrel of a gun. And so that's my second story for you. My second story is parenting all over again, a second generation of children in this city, after having gone through my own experience. And I tell you, progress, thank you. It's slow, and as James Baldwin beautifully said, how long do I have to wait for your progress? Thank you very much.
Amazing. Once again, another round of applause for Olivia Nuamah. How long, how long, how long? So true. Our next speaker, I have to tell you before I introduce our next speaker, last week there's one day I couldn't even go to work because I was having some muscle issues, and I was talking to a chiropractor, and he was trying to explain something to me and just told me, technically he's going to get into some technical things I might not know, like, sacroiliac, and I was like, oh, I know sacroiliac, and the only reason I know that, the only reason, true story, is because of this next speaker. Only reason. He is a motivational speaker, and of course we know him as a Canadian hip-hop superstar, a legend. One of Canada's most successful hip-hop artists, of course. He's won 2 Juno Awards as well. His albums have reached gold and platinum status, of course, and his signature song, of course, what is it? First Canadian hip-hop song to ever go gold. So you can catch him on Mr. D right now. He is still pumping out the projects as well. And of course, like I said, he has been a motivational speaker and someone who a lot of us looked up to when we were younger as well, seeing, wow, look how successful he is. Black man from our city. We can do it too. Please welcome Maestro Fresh West.
If her sacroiliac is beautiful, make some noise. How's everybody doing? How y'all feeling? Man, it's a blessing to be here. I was in the back just watching all the speakers. And listen, I'm born in Toronto, raised in Toronto. Scarborough, make some noise. Where's Scarborough at? Come on now. You know what I'm saying? Now, it's a beautiful thing. The thing is something awesome happened to me a couple days ago. I just got nominated for a Juno Award for Best Rap Recording of the Year for my brand new album. You know what I'm saying? So to me, I'm excited about that because the very first one was 1990, and I didn't win, right? The second one, it was for my first album, Symphony in Effect, and that's when they implemented the first rap recording of the year, and that was in Vancouver. And this Juno Awards is in Vancouver again, and I got nominated again. So to me, I feel blessed because it's like, for some strange reason, when it comes to this genre of music, people put you in a little box, like, this is just a young boy thing, and that's it. You know what I mean? But when you look at rock artists, I've been fortunate enough to meet Leonard Cohen, rest in peace. I've been fortunate enough to meet Gord Downie, right? I've been fortunate enough to meet Neil Young, and there's nothing young about Neil Young, right? Right? Bryan Adams, you know, Randy Bachman, Burton Cummings, you know? And the thing is with these artists is like, they're revered within their genre of music. But for some mystical, miraculous reason, when it comes to hip hop, it's like, it's just for the young cats, and that's it. But when you look at it, hip hop now is the major force in music altogether, right? So if there's any stronghold, that should be over, it should be hip hop, right or wrong. These young kids have been genetically modified and programmed not to listen to cats a little older. Understand what I'm saying? It's not a fluke, it's not a coincidence, right? But I got to say, and a lot of people come to me for advice. They go, Wes, I want to be a rap artist. I want to be a singer. Do you have any advice for me? And I said, yeah, I got advice for you. They said, what's the advice? I said, it's very simple. Don't make records. They say, what, don't make records? I said, yeah, don't make records. Make history, all right? Because anybody can make a record. But by making history is when you do something and you say something that people remember you years and years and years later. Bob Dylan did not make records. He made history. Bob Marley did not make records. He made history. Understand what I'm saying? So we have an opportunity right now to make our own history, right? One thing I like to do with my son is like we check out this bookstore called A Different Book List, right? So he's only 9, but, you know, to me, this is something that it's important to me. So I let him know about Rosa Parks. You know, he can tell you a little something about integration, segregation, right? I let him know about, you don't know about this, but there's a new Spider-Man. There's a black Hispanic Spider-Man. He's mad cool. This dude is mad cool. His name is Miles Morales. He's real peace. He's a black, he's real cool. You know what I'm saying? Spidey's doing some cool things too, right? Right? But something that meant a lot to me, I was at an event a while ago, a few years ago, and I saw this book that stood out to me. It was like a yellow, orangish book, and it said, Against All Odds. And the title was riveting to me. I said, you know what, let me pick this up, Against All Odds. It just sounds ill, right? I picked this up, and they didn't teach me this in school, but Toronto once had a black mayor by the name of William Peyton Hubbard, right? These are the things they don't teach us in school, you know what I'm saying? My son is doing a project right now in ancient Egypt, so we went to the Fairview Mall Library, research library. For some mystical, miraculous reason, the ancient Egypt section is not in the same section as ancient Africa, right? So I had to let him know from a young age, it's like, listen, there's certain reasons out there people don't want to let you know that you're a descendant of greatness. Understand what I'm saying? So we got to let these kids know from a young age that they're descendants of greatness. I named my son Chancellor Williams, right? And because one of the illest books I ever read in my life was The Destruction of Black Civilization by Dr. Chancellor Williams, right? And I kept that name in the back of my mind. So when my son came into the earth, I'm like, that's Chancellor Williams. You know what I'm saying? And it's important, this is real important that I bring him here to certain things so he could see me in different lights, because I'm not just the guy who takes your iPad away from you. You know what I'm saying? Right? Right? I do different things as well, but listen, I came up and my love was hip hop. That was my foundation. I came up and people told me back in the days, Wes, you're dreaming. It'll never happen because you came out of Canada. Maybe something happened to me as a kid. Maybe I fell down, bucked my head a couple times, but I'm the type of person, if I believe I can make something happen, I'm do my best to make it happen. They said, you want to make it happen in Canada, it'll never happen. So I said, okay, I'll just drive down to New York City. Back in the days, we didn't have GPS. All we had was you know, we ended up in a place called Lake Placid, right? But listen, I came back, and like I said, you know, a lot of good things are happening. But like I said, everybody out here, we don't make records, we make history. And let's make our own history right now. Thank you. God bless.
Okay, and Wes, it's the Pearlies. That's what you had. The map? It's Pearlies, right? All right, thank you so much again for everything that you have done as well. It's great to hear. And now we've come to the end of the program, guys. Unfortunately, I know, time flies when you're I know, right? What is right? Time flies when you're hearing such incredible, inspiring speeches as well. So I want to thank everyone in here tonight, not just the speakers, but everyone who came out here tonight to listen to this programming. It is so important to hear from people like the people who we heard from today, who are not only making history, but are also making the future for us as well. And we're all a part of that. So thank you so much for coming. I also want to thank our media sponsor, Afro Global Television. Thank you so much. I know Patricia and Moses are in here as well. Thank you so much. Thank you to our sponsor, TD Bank, as well, for making this happen, and to everyone at Historica Canada. So as we close out the evening, I want to introduce you to our closing act, which is going to be amazing. These are young people who have come together in the Goma Ensemble. They're a youth drumming group, and you know what? They're gonna really blow our minds right now. They're as young, between 5 and 14 years old. They work out of the Driftwood Community Center right here in our city. So please, a big round of applause to close out the evening tonight for the Goma Ensemble.
job, man. Good job. Good job, holy